I was reviewing my daughter-in-law's financial records when I realized my son had no idea who he'd married into, or more importantly, who his father actually was. My name is Roy Callahan. I'm 63 years old, and 14 months ago, I was lying on an operating table at Mercy General Hospital in Raleigh, while my son was emptying my life's work into his own pockets. He sold my mountain cabin. He liquidated my coin collection. 40 years of careful acquisition, pieces I'd hunted down at estate sales across 11 states. He forged my name on transfer documents and told everyone who asked that I'd authorized everything before my stroke. He was wrong about one thing. He used my property management company to process the cabin sale. He just didn't know it was mine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why my son believed he could do this, you need to understand who he thought I was. And to understand that, I need to take you back to a Tuesday morning in March, when everything changed. I'd been having headaches for about 2 weeks. Nothing dramatic, the kind you chalk up to too much coffee or not enough sleep. I was at my desk in the spare bedroom I use as an office, paying bills, going through some property records, when the left side of my face went numb, not painful, just absent. Like that side of me had simply decided to stop participating. I remember thinking, that's odd. I remember reaching for my phone. I remember the carpet coming up very fast. My neighbor, a retired school teacher named Fran, who walks her beagle past my house every morning at 7:15, saw me through the front window. She called 911. If she'd been 5 minutes later on her walk, my doctors told me later, I probably don't wake up. I spent 11 days at Mercy General. Ischemic stroke. Left side weakness. Some speech difficulty in the early days, but my cognition was intact throughout. Dr. Anita Patel ran a full neurological workup on day 3. I scored perfectly on every assessment. She noted it in my chart. Patient demonstrates full cognitive function, excellent recall, appropriate affect. I remember asking her if I could start reviewing contracts from my hospital bed. She told me to rest first. My son, I'll call him Devin because that's his name, arrived the afternoon of day 1. He lives about 40 minutes away in Cary. He sat by my bed, held my hand, cried a little. Told me he'd handle everything while I recovered. Don't worry about the business, Dad. Don't worry about the properties. Just focus on getting better. I was weak. I was tired. I said okay. That was my mistake. On day 4, Devin asked me where I kept my important documents. Said he needed to find my health insurance information, figure out what was covered, make sure the bills got handled. I told him the filing cabinet in the spare bedroom, top drawer, the one with the green hanging folder. What I didn't know was that the green folder also contained a blank power of attorney template I'd drawn up 3 years ago and never finalized. My estate attorney, I'll call her Helen because that's what everyone calls her, had prepared it when I was dealing with some complicated property acquisitions. I'd never signed it, never needed to. Devin found it, and he signed my name. The forgery was decent. He'd practiced somewhere, clearly, but he'd signed the wrong version of my signature, the one I used in my 30s, before I started shortening the loop on my capital R. I noticed it the moment I saw the document 6 weeks later. 30 years of signing legal papers teaches you things about your own handwriting. By the time I came home, the cabin was gone. Sold to a young couple from Charlotte for $340,000. A fair price, but not mine to accept. The coin collection. $127,000 worth of Morgan dollars, seated Liberty halves, and 3 coins I'd been particularly proud of finding, sold to a dealer in Asheville for $89,000. Quick sale price. Devin had needed cash fast. He'd used Ridgeline Property Group to handle the cabin transaction. Ridgeline is a boutique property management and sales firm based in Raleigh, specializing in mountain and lake properties across western North Carolina. I founded Ridgeline in 2001 with my business partner, a man I'll call Walt, because that's his name, and he'll probably read this eventually. Devin had no idea. I didn't confront him right away. That's the part people find hardest to believe when I tell this story. He picked me up from the hospital, drove me home in his SUV, helped me into the house, and I didn't say a word about any of it. Partly because I was still physically weak, mostly because I was calculating. I grew up watching my father react first and think second, and I watched that cost him in ways he never fully recovered from. I promised myself a long time ago I'd do things differently. By the time Devon pulled into my driveway, I'd already decided I wasn't going to touch this with anger. Anger was what Devon was expecting. Anger was something he could navigate, negotiate, deflect. What I was going to use instead was documentation. The first thing I did when I got home, before I unpacked, before I sat down, before I even made coffee, was call Walt. You still have the security footage from the Ridgeline office. From when? March 14th through March 20th. Silence on the line. Then Roy. What happened? Pull the footage. Don't delete anything. And Walt. Pull the Hargrove cabin file. Every document. Every signature page. He called me back 2 hours later. His voice was tight in a way I hadn't heard since we almost lost a major commercial lease in 2009. Roy. Someone came in on March 16th claiming to be acting under your power of attorney. Said you'd authorized a full listing and expedited sale on the Hargrove property. Our associate processed it. She's newer, only been with us 8 months. He was very convincing. Did we catch him on camera? Front desk, conference room, parking lot. Clear footage, Roy. It's him. I'd been signing legal documents since 1987. I'd built a property management company from scratch. I'd navigated 3 recessions, a partnership dispute, and a commercial tenant who tried to vanish with 6 months of unpaid rent. I knew what documentation looked like, and I knew how to build a case. I called Dr. Patel next and asked her to preserve my full cognitive assessment records from my hospital stay. She didn't ask why. She told me they were already part of my permanent file, and that she'd be happy to provide written confirmation of my mental status at any point during my recovery if I needed it. Then I called my attorney, Helen. She'd been my estate attorney for 16 years. She knew my business, knew my family situation, knew the full scope of what Ridgeline represented. When I told her what Devon had done, there was a long pause. Tom. She stopped. Sorry. Roy. Do you want me to move immediately, or do you want to wait? I want to wait, I said. Devon's wife is having a baby shower in 6 weeks. He's planning a big family gathering at the Andersons event hall. He specifically asked me to come and say a few words about how proud I am of how he's been handling things. Another pause. Longer this time. You're going to let him set his own stage, she said. He asked me to give a toast. I'm going to give him exactly the toast he asked for. I spent those 6 weeks quietly building what Helen later called one of the cleanest fraud documentation packages she'd seen outside of a professional forensic accounting firm. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Christine Bask, who came highly recommended by a colleague, and asked her to trace exactly where the money had gone. The cabin sale had netted $340,000. The coin sale had brought in $89,000. Combined, $429,000. Christine's report came back in 10 days. Of that $429,000, approximately $38,000 had gone into what appeared to be a legitimate investment account. The rest had been spent. A $22,000 home theater installation, a $14,000 vacation to Costa Rica. Devon had posted photos on social media. I'd seen them, hadn't put it together. A $9,500 watch, car upgrades, furniture, 3 months of restaurant and entertainment charges that averaged about $4,000 a month. He'd also, Christine found, told several people, including his wife's parents, that the money was an early inheritance I'd given him voluntarily. A gift from a grateful father who wanted his son to have a good start. I sat with that information for a long time. My late wife Carol had said something to me years ago. when Devon was in his mid-20s and going through a rough stretch. She'd said, "He needs to know there are consequences, Roy. Real ones, not just a conversation." I'd softened the edges at the time. I'd no-sated instead of held firm. Carol had given me a look I still think about. She'd been gone 4 years. But I could still hear her voice in that kitchen. 2 weeks before the baby shower, Devon came over for what he called a financial check-in. He brought a folder of printouts, investment statements, projected returns, a lot of language that sounded sophisticated if you didn't look closely. I made coffee. I let him talk. I'd placed my phone face down on the counter, with the voice memo app running before he arrived. "Dad, I know the cabin sale probably felt sudden," he said. "But the property was sitting there, not generating income. Property taxes going up every year. I moved everything into a diversified growth portfolio. You're going to see real returns on this. Show me the statements," I said. He pushed a sheet across the table. I looked at it for about 4 seconds. "Devon, this is a template. These numbers aren't populated. It's a projection model. The actual account takes 30 days to show me the account number." He shifted in his seat. "Dad, I don't have it memorized. Log in." "I don't have my laptop. Use your phone." He picked up his phone, looked at it, put it back down. "Dad, I think you're getting yourself worked up, and your doctor specifically said, 'Where is the money, Devon?'" The kitchen was very quiet. "It's invested. I told you." "In what?" He named something. I Googled it on my own phone while he was talking. "Nothing came up. That fund doesn't exist," I said. "It's new. Exclusive access through a private wealth management." I called my bank. Put it on speaker. The representative had no record of any account matching what Devon had described. We sat across the kitchen table from each other, and I watched my son's face do the thing faces do when a story stops holding together. The muscles around his eyes tightened. His jaw shifted slightly left. He looked, for just a moment, exactly like he had at age 9, when I'd caught him lying about a broken window. "Devon," I said, "how much is actually left?" He stared at the table. "About 40,000. I'd had $429,000. You spent nearly $390,000 in 6 weeks. I made some investments that didn't. You bought a watch and went to Costa Rica." He didn't answer. "And you forged my signature." Still nothing. "You committed fraud against your father when he was recovering from a stroke. You used a forged power of attorney to sell property that wasn't yours to sell, and then you spent the money. And you told your in-laws I gave it to you as a gift." He finally looked up. "Dad, I was going to pay it back. I just needed... Go home, Devon." "Dad, I'm not angry right now. I'm just tired. Go home." He left, and I sat in my kitchen for a long time, listening to the recording play back, making sure it had captured everything clearly. It had. The baby shower was held at the Andersons' event hall on a Saturday in late May. A beautiful space. About 150 guests, Devon's wife surrounded by family and friends and gift tables stacked high. Devon had texted me the week before, "Dad, I'd love for you to say a few words. Tell everyone how you've been doing since the stroke. Let them know you're okay. It would really mean a lot." I arrived with a manila envelope and my best blazer. Devon met me near the entrance, shook my hand warmly, introduced me around. His father-in-law, a solid, straightforward man named Jeff, who runs a landscaping company in Fuquay-Varina, found me near the drink table and introduced himself properly for the first time. "Roy, glad you could make it. Devon talks about you constantly, says you've been mentoring him on real estate investment." "Has he?" I said. "He told us you set him up with some of your investment contacts. Really got him started on the right foot. We're proud of how seriously he's been taking his financial future." I looked at Jeff carefully. He wasn't performing anything. He genuinely believed what he'd been told. "Jeff," I said, I think there are some things about Devon's situation you and I should probably discuss before the end of the afternoon. He frowned. Is everything all right? Before I could answer, Devon appeared at my elbow and steered me gently toward the center of the room. Someone was tapping a glass. He handed me a microphone. 200 people looked up. Ladies and gentlemen, Devon said, smiling. My father, Roy Callahan. I looked at the room. I looked at my son. He was beaming. Proud. Relaxed. He'd invited me here, given me the microphone, set the stage himself. Thank you, I said. I'll keep this short because I know we're here to celebrate something wonderful today. Devon nodded encouragingly. 3 months ago, I said, I had a stroke. I spent 11 days at Mercy General, and while I was lying in that hospital bed, Devon stepped in and took care of some things. Warm smiles from the crowd. He sold my mountain cabin in Caldwell County. He liquidated my coin collection. He processed both transactions through Ridgeline Property Group, which he told people was just a local firm that gave him a good deal. The room was still smiling, but the smiles were getting uncertain. I reached into my envelope and set a document on the nearest table. Ridgeline Property Group was founded in 2001. I've been the majority owner for 23 years. I looked at Devon. You used my company to sell my property without my knowledge. They paid me commission on the transaction. You paid me to help you defraud me. The room had gone very quiet. Devon took a step forward. Dad, I also want everyone here to know something. I pulled out a second document. Dr. Patel's written confirmation of my cognitive status during hospitalization. I was assessed by my neurologist throughout my hospital stay. Full cognitive function, perfect scores. The power of attorney documents Devon filed were forged. I was lucid. I never signed them. His wife, from across the room, said his name. Just his name. The way people say it when a question is too big to ask out loud. Jeff stepped forward. Roy, are you saying? I'm saying Devon forged legal documents and sold $429,000 in my assets while I was recovering from a stroke. I'm saying he spent most of that money on vacations and home improvements and told your family it was a gift from me. The room erupted in the particular way that rooms do when something real breaks through the surface of a social occasion. Voices, movement, phones coming out. Devon looked at me. For a moment I saw the 9-year-old again. The broken window. The face that couldn't decide whether to keep lying or collapse. Dad, he said quietly. Please. I love you, Devon, I said. But you asked me to come here and talk about your financial decisions, so I did. I set the microphone down on the table and walked toward Jeff. I think that conversation we didn't finish, I said, is probably overdue. I filed a formal police report that evening. Detective Luis Garza from the Raleigh PD White Collar Unit had already received a call from Dr. Traum, Patel. She'd heard about the situation through Helen and reached out proactively. When I arrived at the station, Garza already had my medical records flagged and was familiar with the outline. Mr. Callahan, he said, this is one of the better documented elder fraud cases I've come across. Most victims don't have this kind of paper trail. I've been in business for 30 years, I said. Documentation is the only thing that holds up. Devon was arrested 2 days later at his home. The charges were substantial. Elder financial abuse, forgery, theft over $100,000. His employer, a regional bank where he'd worked as a mortgage processor, placed him on immediate unpaid leave. He called me from custody. Dad, I need you to post bail. No. Dad? Devon, everything we say is being recorded. Please don't say anything that makes your situation worse. Call your attorney. I can't afford. The public defender's office is very competent. Call them. He was quiet for a moment. Then, are you trying to destroy me? I thought about Carol. I thought about what she'd said about real consequences. I'm trying to give you something you should have had years ago, I said. Accountability. I'm sorry it took this shape. His case went to court 4 months later. He pleaded guilty to all charges. The judge, a measured woman named Judge Patricia Okafor, noted his cooperation, his lack of prior criminal record, and a statement I'd submitted requesting she consider rehabilitation alongside punishment. She sentenced him to 3 years with parole eligibility at 18 months, full restitution of $397. The difference between what he'd taken and the roughly $40,000 still recoverable. As the bailiff let him away, Devin looked back at me. I nodded. That was all I had right then. The months that followed were strange. The story got around. Raleigh isn't enormous, and the real estate community is smaller still. James Whitmore, the president of the North Carolina Property Management Association, called to tell me that our case was being used as a framework for a new elder fraud awareness initiative. The association was co-sponsoring with the state attorney general's office. Jeff reached out 3 weeks after the baby shower, came to my house with a casserole his wife had made, and an apology I hadn't asked for, but appreciated. "We should have asked harder questions," he said. "You trusted your son-in-law," I said. "That's not a character flaw." Walt and I expanded Ridgeline into 2 new service areas, partly because the exposure had been unexpectedly good for business, which I found equal parts gratifying and absurd. Helen updated my estate documents with the kind of layered protections that should have been there to begin with. Multiple trustees required for any major transaction, quarterly third-party reviews, nothing accessible to any single family member without independent legal verification. I signed those documents with a steady hand and felt, for the first time since coming home from Mercy General, like I was fully in control of my own life again. 8 months after sentencing, a letter came from the correctional facility. "Dad, I've been in a financial crimes accountability program here. It's run by a retired federal prosecutor, and it's honestly the most honest conversation about money I've ever been part of. We talk about what we told ourselves to justify what we did, and when I have to say mine out loud, I can barely get through it. I told myself you wouldn't notice. I told myself I'd pay it back before you found out. I told myself you had plenty." Every one of those sentences is a way of saying, I stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as a resource. I know that now. I've been thinking about what it cost you. Not just the money. You were in a hospital bed recovering from a stroke, and instead of being able to focus on getting well, your son was dismantling your life. I put that on you when you were most vulnerable. I don't know how to apologize for that in a way that means anything. I'm not asking to come home. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did. Not legally. Actually. Your son, Devin. I read it twice. Then I walked out to the back porch and sat in the chair I sit in when I need to think without any walls around me. Carol had a saying she used when one of us was working through something hard. She'd say, "You don't have to know what comes next. You just have to know what's true right now." What was true right now was that my son had done something I still couldn't fully comprehend, and that he was beginning to understand it himself. What was true was that I was 63 years old and had built something real and protected it and was still here to make decisions about it. What was true was that I missed my wife, and I was glad she'd left me enough good instincts to get through this without becoming someone I didn't recognize. I wrote back the same week. "Devin, I received your letter. I've read it several times. What you described, the way you stopped seeing me as a person. That's the thing I most needed to hear you say, not the legal admission. That. I don't know what our relationship looks like when you come home. I don't have an answer to that yet, and I won't pretend I do, but I know that the door isn't closed. What's behind it depends on who you decide to be for the rest of your life. Your father, Roy." I sealed the envelope and held it for a moment before I set it with the outgoing mail, somewhere in my filing cabinet, in the original green hanging folder, which I'd moved to a locked fireproof box, were the documents that had started all of this. The forged signatures, the fabricated power of attorney, the Ridgeline transaction records, 30 pages of evidence that my son had looked at my life and decided it was his to take. And in the same box, in a separate envelope, was a letter Carol had written me the year before she died. I'd read it so many times the crease marks had softened. She'd written, "Don't let the hard things make you hard, Roy. You're better than that. Devon is still your son. Don't forget that either." Even when it's difficult to remember. I'd been trying to hold both of those things at once for 8 months. I wasn't sure I'd always managed it, but I was still trying. That felt like enough for now. If you've made it to the end of this, thank you for listening. Drop a comment below and let me know, what would you have done differently? And if this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. There are more stories to tell. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened. Not just the fraud, not just the court date, not just the morning I walked into that baby shower with a manila envelope under my arm. All of it. The whole arc of it. And the thing I keep coming back to isn't anger. It passed through anger a long time ago. It's something quieter. Something closer to understanding. What Devon did wasn't random. It didn't come from nowhere. I've had to be honest with myself about that. For years, I kept my business life separate from my family life because I thought I was protecting him from pressure, from expectation. I didn't want him coasting on my name or measuring himself against what I'd built. What I didn't see, and Carol probably saw it before I did, was that the silence created its own kind of distortion. He built a story about who I was, and I never corrected it. A retired guy with some rental properties. Lucky. Modest. Easy to underestimate. I let that story stand, because I thought humility was a virtue I was modeling. But you can't teach someone the value of something you've never shown them. That's not an excuse for what he did. I want to be clear about that. Devon made choices. He forged documents. He spent money that wasn't his, and constructed a lie elaborate enough to fool an entire family. Those are his actions, and he owns them. But I've learned that accountability works in both directions. If I'm going to be honest about what he did wrong, I have to be honest about what I missed. The legal system gave him consequences. Real ones. The kind Carol always believed in. But here's what I've come to think about consequences. They only matter if the person on the receiving end is capable of actually receiving them. Devon, to his credit, seems to be doing that. The letter he sent wasn't the letter of someone looking for an exit. It was the letter of someone sitting in an uncomfortable room with the truth about himself without anywhere to run from it. That takes something. I don't know what to call it except a kind of honesty that's harder than any I've had to practice. I'm not rushing anything. I'm 63 years old and I've learned that patience applied in the right direction is one of the most powerful tools there is. I used it to document a fraud case that prosecutors called unusually thorough. I used it to wait for the right moment at that baby shower instead of confronting Devon in my kitchen when I first found the papers. Patience isn't passivity. It's choosing when to act and having the discipline to wait until that moment is right. What I want anyone to take from this, if you're a parent, if you're watching an adult child make choices that concern you, if you're someone who's been taken advantage of by someone you trusted, is that your response to betrayal doesn't have to look like the betrayal itself. Devon acted out of desperation and carelessness, and a story he told himself until he believed it. I responded with documentation, with stillness, with the willingness to stand in front of 150 people and simply tell the truth. Those are different kinds of character. You get to choose which one you are. The door isn't closed. I meant that when I wrote it. But what's behind it depends entirely on who Devon decides to be from here forward. Not what he says, or he does, one honest day at a time. That's all any of us can really offer each other in the end.